my presentation is rather for as food for thought. My presentation consists of a lot of hypothetical questions, and this is for rather discussions, not for offering my ideas. Well, I start with this list. This is a list of conventions specifically designed for various types of cultural properties. Well, only the black one was adopted by UNIDROIT, but all others are UNESCO conventions. UNESCO made 6 conventions. Well, the very top one is a cultural expression. So if you exclude this, although it is somehow related to intangible cultural heritage, we have, let's say, 5 conventions in the field of cultural property or cultural heritage, and 1 UNIDROIT convention. When we closely look at these conventions, we could identify that each instrument is designed for peacetime or wartime, and depending upon the specific heritage types. The problem of this current situation is that, is it enough, or is it comprehensive enough to cover the issues raised in contemporary society? Well, in 2015, the World Heritage Committee adopted this Bonn Declaration, and that was inspired by the situations in Syria, Yemen, and Nepal, and so on, so on. In the last several years, the cultural heritage was a target of various attacks, and it was damaged by intentional destructive actions or by natural disasters, so that the World Heritage Committee, in the context of World Heritage, it tries to, let's say, raise awareness to, let's say, the importance of collaborations of different instruments. So from this background, this declaration mentions many cases that I mentioned already, and also the conventions, especially 1954 conventions for the protection of cultural property in armed conflict, and the World Heritage Convention, and so on. This paragraph I singled out because of its language. This says that we, the members of the World Heritage Committee, call upon state parties to evaluate their implementation of pertinent legal binding and other instruments, and strengthen their national legislation and practice for the protection of cultural natural heritage, also by introducing more effective measures to combat illicit trafficking and illegal trade of cultural properties. This paragraph doesn't mention anything about armed conflict or natural disasters or whatever. So generally, protection of cultural heritage plus combat illicit trafficking and illegal trade of cultural properties. So this, the language is rather, let's say, general, and so then this language actually made me think what the output of this paragraph should be in the context of World Heritage Convention. And this kind of thought was not often made or offered. So this is, for me as well, that was a sort of exercise. And this is still the background. I don't know if how much if you're familiar with this case. This is this person is called Al-Mahdi, who initiated the intentional destruction against the mausoleums and mosques in Timbuktu in Mali. And he was prosecuted in front of the International Criminal Court. And was that actually this was the picture on the left-hand side from your seat is a destruction, just a part of destruction. On the right-hand side was reconstruction. So Timbuktu was reconstructed. Well, this is the summary of this case. And the court found him guilty and sentenced to 9 years in imprisonment. And last year, exactly about a year ago, the trial chamber 8 found this Al-Mahdi guilty as a co-perpetrator of the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against historic monuments and buildings dedicated to religion, including 9 mausoleums and mosque in Timbuktu. And the time spent in detention, well, this is a technical things. And interestingly, this judgment refers to the World Heritage status of this destroyed monument. Well, this is a part of the citation. All the sites but one were UNESCO World Heritage sites, and as such, their attack appears to be of a particular gravity, as their destruction does not only affect direct victims of the crimes, namely the faithful and inhabitants of Timbuktu, but also people throughout Mali and the international community. So the fact that these sites as World Heritage, as inscribed as World Heritage, gave a particular importance in terms of the level of the crime. Last month, on August 17 this year, the same trial chamber issued a reparations order. And it concludes that Mr. Al-Mahdi is liable for 2.7 million euros in expenses for individual and collective reparations for the community of Timbuktu for internationally directing attacks against religious and historic buildings in that city. And well, this chamber encourages the trust fund for victims to complement the reparations award and direct the fund to submit a draft implementation plan for 16th February 2018. Of course, this person cannot pay 2.7 million euros, so and symbolically he paid €1 to UNESCO, and how to deal with this judgment is the people are still working on it. But the important thing is that not only make him guilty, but also the reparations was ordered. So this means the World Heritage status somehow, although it is not directly provided for or in a convention, gives certain legal outcomes. So under such circumstances, well, this is another, well, the general, a part of the citation, but I will skip it because it is already somehow explained already. Under such circumstances, some hypothetical cases could be thinkable, and it could raise some possible questions to us as food for thought. The first case, this is just a hypothetical case. This is a tea house, one of the most beautiful tea houses in my country, and is one of the 3 national treasures as tea houses. It was built in 1618 in Kyoto. And in 1908, it was moved to Tokyo because it was bought by a Mitsui family. Mitsui is one of the biggest trading companies, and the founder family bought this house tea house. And it was moved to Tokyo, let's say, 500 kilometers away. And in 1936, it was designated as important cultural property. And it was further moved to Oiso. This is a summer residence of the Mitsui family in 1938. And it was designated as national treasure in 1951. And then this was sold to another a private company, and is now situated in Inuyama. It's not far from Nagoya. It's again 350 kilometers travel for this building. You may wonder why, or if it's possible to move house from one place to another. This is the contemporary design of a tea house. By the way, on the tea house on the right-hand side, it was made by Hiroshi Sugimoto on the occasion of the Biennale in Venice. But the other pictures show that this tea house can move. This is not the fixed and stable structure. Already, this history shows that the tea house could be moved to one place to another, and this is the contemporary version. Here, as hypothetical questions. Suppose this tea house is a part of the archaeological garden inscribed as World Heritage. Is a tea house a property movable or immovable? And how to define movable or immovable? And if the owner of the garden sold a tea house to a foreign buyer, for example, an American billionaire who loves the Japanese garden, and the owner sold that house only, without state permission, could its return be claimed? And if the result different, if the tea house is not a part of the World Heritage Site? So this is just an introductory exercise, but is the state hypothetical status of World Heritage bring about difference or not? So this is a sort of series of questions. Simply the character of the property as a movable property or immovable property cannot be so clear. And then a series of questions may follow. Another hypothetical case. This is the Tokyo station in 1914. Please remember that the design. And it was bombed and became a ruin in 1945. In 1947, it was rebuilt, but it was restored in 2012, but you see the difference of the designs. After the destruction of 1945, it took only 2 years until it was rebuilt again, and because it was necessary to build it as quickly as possible, so they could not restore to the original form. And then more than 60 years later, it was rebuilt, but to go back to the original form. So this is the difference. The picture on the top shows the original design, and then the current design is I'm sorry. The design on the top. This was the design of the first rebuilding in 1947, and then the current design and the original design is 1982. This is built at the bottom of this picture. So this example shows what is the original to be restored, to which time we should go back, and what is the justification for that. And suppose that the station is inscribed as a World Heritage Site before the most recent reconstruction, then of course that kind of reconstruction would need permission of the World Heritage Committee. Then we have this case. This is the Bamiyan Buddha before its destruction by Taliban. And this is after. Next week, there will be a meeting, experts meeting on Bamiyan about revitalization of Bamiyan Valley. So this will be discussed, what to do. A possible solution might be this. There are about 30% of the Buddha is somehow there. 70% is pulverized, but 30% of debris is still there. So collect these 30% debris and put exactly where you are. That could be a possible option as a reconstruction. I don't know if it can be supported or not. There'll be a very interesting discussion next week. Well, here's the question. Suppose that some debris is stored in another country. Could its return be claimed? And if it was taken before destruction, would the result be different? The point is here, but the point is that the Bamiyan was inscribed as a World Heritage after its destruction. So is the status of World Heritage makes a change, makes difference or not? And what should be the, well, you know, this first in the case of Bamiyan, it was destroyed first, and it was evaluated, and this criteria, authenticity and integrity test was examined, and it was inscribed. And then the debris was found somewhere else. How could it be justified to return? So these are the series of questions that the lawyers would gladly discuss. The last case, this is the castle in Nagoya. And this castle is very famous for the golden dolphin on the top of the roof. This is sort of, people in Nagoya are very proud of it. Unfortunately, it was bombed and the building was completely lost. Well, the original building was built in 17th century and is designated as the first national treasure in my country. And well, the golden dolphins was a symbol, and originally 270 kilograms of gold was used to make these dolphins. When it's burned down, castle was rebuilt as a concrete building, and the copy of gold dolphins were made and added, maybe not using so much gold at the moment. It's much less gold, but still some gold are used. And this tea kettle, well, they after the bombing, they found some gold melted, and they collected this gold and made this tea kettle. Here's a question. Suppose the castle is a World Heritage Site before its destruction. And suppose that the golden dolphins had been detached before the destruction of the castle and stored in a museum. Then they were stolen and found in another country. Could the return be claimed? If not the dolphins, but the tea kettle was taken away, would the same conclusion justification applicable? So all these hypothetical questions, but if you try to connect these restitution issues and the World Heritage Conventions and both requirements together, the series of questions would come up. And I'm sorry to say that I do not have any answer to you. Just I raise questions, and just if you take this back and maybe discuss during a coffee break or lunch break, I think that would be perfect for my, let's say, as my wish to present this case. But anyway, I never thought about these kinds of things before I received the invitation from this conference. So I'm very grateful that this conference gave me to make this kind of thoughts and it's still the very early stage. So if you could help us to develop, it would be wonderful. Thank you very much.